Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for the sunshine this morning. Thank you for this church, this place that we get to gather. Thank you for being here with us, Lord. We're just grateful to be able to be in a place that lets us take some time out of our busy schedules every week and sit down and be quiet and learn about you. Lord, that is something foreign to our culture. And so we're grateful for that gift to do that today. Lord, as we enter into our lesson, I just ask that you would help open our eyes and our hearts to see you and to see who you are this morning, Lord. And so we just pray that we would have receptive hearts, receptive ears, and just a willingness to hear from you. So we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Lovely. So this morning, our computer decided not to work. So we'll see how this goes. This morning we're talking about, is there a God? That's kind of the big question that we're going to be tackling. Is there a God? So if you've got your notebooks, you can turn it. It's the third lesson of Unit 2. If we kind of think about the little bit of a rabbit trail that we've been on in this unit, maybe you'll be able to see a little bit of a thread with me. The first class of our unit was, well, what do you trust? Right? We were realizing that everybody operates off of some level of trust of something. And so we talked about what things do we trust in order to build up our worldviews. And ultimately, I brought up kind of my argument that I believe that the Bible is the most trustworthy thing for us to build our worldview off of. So we started there with an idea of what do we trust? Well, I think we should trust the Bible. But then we jumped into last week's class on worldview options. So that kind of went into, well, if you don't trust the Bible and you do trust other things, these are kind of the options that you're left with. And we had pantheism, or as it was corrected to me, polytheism, the beliefs of many gods. Theism or deism, monotheism, the belief of one God, whether personal or impersonal, and then naturalism, which is that there's no spiritual anything. Some people just made that up, and matter and the things that you can see and touch and interact with are all that's there. And then we're jumping into, okay, maybe we just are overcomplicating things a little bit here. Let's boil it all down to one simple question. Is there a God? Because we can get into all of these specifics, but we can't get into the specifics until we first attack the big question of, well, is there a God? Is there a divine being? Is there a supernatural world? Or is everything just the stuff that I can see and interact with? So we're going to start out, there we go, in Psalm 19. Psalm 19, and I'm gonna read the verse. Says we're reading the first 4 verses, and then I'm going to open it up for some discussion or open it up to a turn and talk, which will lead into some discussion about what stands out to you in Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. All right, and if you've got your Bible, you can also look at the rest of Psalm 19. But I wanted to take a little bit of time and think, if we're talking about, okay, is there a God? Well, how does Psalm 19 relate to that? So let's take a little bit of time and use our brains at this both early and late hour of the day, thanks to daylight savings, and see what we come up with. What are we thinking here? What stands out to you about this verse and how it relates to the question, is there a God? Elijah?
Well, in the first sentence, it really proclaims that, is there a God? The question. The heavens declare the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
The skies proclaim the work of his hands.
Yeah.
So I think that just the word God, when the football players or like sports players like score a touchdown, hit a home run, they like if they're Christians, they'll like point up to God and like and on TV like you see them like point up and acting like that's cool because they're not some of them aren't afraid to make God known.
Yeah, that's great. How people, even in very public areas like professional athletes, often try to point glory away from themselves and to God, for sure. Because as the first verse is saying, the heavens declare the glory of God. Yeah. What else? Other thoughts that we've got? I'm going to try to let someone else have a second, Elijah, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, Elijah, you go.
In the fourth line, it
Uh-huh.
they had no speech. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, and their words to the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like that God, like his voice goes out when sometimes he can be at multiple places at once, so he's really good at multitasking. I would say.
Yeah.
Because he's with everyone in the earth, and that's like trillions and billions, yeah, lots of people, and his voice goes out to all the earth, and his words, their words to the end of the world. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like he can speak in like so many different places. In one place, and then goes out to like different people.
Yeah. You think it's a Sunday morning, right? And God is present in our service here, but God's also present at the services at churches across town or down the street and in other cities and in other countries and around the world. Yeah, he's not bound by location. What else do we see here about, is there a God? Yeah.
At number 3, it says they have no speech, they use no words, no sound is heard from them.
Uh-huh.
I feel like they're trying to describe how actions can also tell things.
Oh, yeah. Because you think if we're talking about creation, right? We're talking about the things around us, the nonverbal world. And somehow, non-verbally, without using words, stuff can still point us to God and show us who God is. That's pretty crazy to think about, right? Let's see. I know a few of you were in our class last year. Wait, do we have any other thoughts really quick before I jump into that?
Consider nature evidence.
Yes.
So like if you were in court and someone showed a photo and no one said anything, the photo can speak for itself and provide evidence of something.
Yeah.
And that's what nature is.
Yeah.
It's providing evidence of a supernatural being. Because you can't examine nature without concluding that there is.
Right. So nature is almost like a picture in a court trial that shows some evidence of something that happened, but doesn't necessarily use words verbally to tell you what happened. It just shows you. That's kind of what creation can be. If we look at creation, we boil it down, we can see, just looking around us and being careful to pay attention, that there's a God who's doing some stuff.
We see that in Romans 1, right?
Yeah.
Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse."
Yep. So we can make sense of the world around us and look at it and be like, wow, God is super cool. So the reason I was calling back to class last year is that I believe we had an entire class. If not an entire class, we definitely touched on these two big ideas. One is called general revelation, and one is called special revelation. Has anyone ever heard those terms before? A few people? Let's go, I like it. So, there are two ways that revelation, right? God reveals himself to us. So the first one that maybe we often think about is special revelation, and that's our Bible, right? That, well, yeah, I open up my Bible and I'm like, oh yeah, there's God. And if, like we look at what we looked at a few weeks ago with all those graphs and things, and you look at the evidence that God has created in the Bible that's pointing to himself, you can go, yeah, okay, I get it. There's a special book that God has specially written, and in that special book, he tells us all about who he is. That's special revelation. But we also have this thing called general revelation. And that is what Romans 1 is getting at, that there's a God, and he tells us and communicates to us that he's there through creation. So I remember a story of when this, like, because at first I was like, yeah, but like everyone sees creation and goes, yeah, but there's no God. So I didn't quite understand it until I was in high school, and I was driving one evening. We had like a meeting for a group that I was in, so I was driving to this meeting, and there was a thunderstorm that night. And just straight in front of my car, I saw this huge bolt of lightning shoot out of the sky, this loud thunder, and it shook my car. It didn't hit my car, but it was right in front of me, and it shook my car. And I just remember thinking right then, like, if this is how powerful lightning and thunder can be, how powerful is God? And it hit me right there, like, oh, the heavens are declaring the glory of God. Like, the world is telling me about who God is. Yeah, Elijah.
I just thought of this, but like maybe like the thunder could be like God like snapping his fingers super loud or like something like that. Like I like to think about like it references like in the Bible. I think that the world was God's footstep.
Yeah.
So I like just playing around with like all the things in the world that like we're like little fleas.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. And then you have people who always will, think about, well, God didn't make the whole universe just for people, right? Well, why not? He wants to show us how great he is, how big he is, how infinite he is, right? We can't explore all the universe even. Imagine thinking that we could explore all of who God is in one lifetime, right? Like God is just showing off who he is through his creation. To things of like, I don't know if you've seen like, what is it, the Fibonacci sequence or whatever, the spirally thing? That's something mathy. My math people get that. I went to Bible college. We took one math class. And but there's like the spirally thing, Fibonacci sequence. And if you cut open like a pine cone or whatever, you can like see it inside of a pine cone or like in a snail shell or something like that. Like you can see creation is like just showing off like there's some sort of more complex mathematical thing going on here, right? Even like you boil it all the way down to people's DNA. Like your DNA is like a coded book or like a computer code, if anyone's ever done computer coding classes. I know those are kind of big now. But it's like someone has to sit down and write a code, right? Codes don't just happen. Languages don't just happen on their own. Somebody or a group of people has to put them together. And so if you look at DNA, and you could take someone's strand of DNA and go send it across the world, and someone could read it there and know, oh, this person has this color hair, and they're this tall, and they've got this color eyes, and their hair grows this quickly. And I like just ridiculously crazy random facts about you that people can figure out just by reading your DNA. Because it's a book. And books are written by authors and intelligent people. Like, all of creation is declaring that there's this God behind it. So, I don't remember which slide is next, but, okay, perfect, this one. And this kind of gets down into something called the contingency argument. So I kind of took this telling of the contingency argument from a guy named William Lane Craig. He is an apologist, so his job is basically going around and arguing for God. Not that God needs us to argue for him, but there are definitely some people who are very smart and really good at coming up with these beautiful, logical arguments that declare who God is and his glory. So the contingency argument is basically kind of asking the question of, well, why does anything exist? Right? If we're talking about is there a God, does God exist? he would boil that down and first say, well, does anything exist? And if it does, why? Right? There seems to be this like drawing inside of each of us that's like there has to be a reason, right? There has to be a why to things existing. They can't just exist for the sake of existence. There has to be some sort of a reason. So William Lane Craig's argument is everything that exists has an explanation of existence. This is either done by its own nature or by the nature of an external cause. So everything that exists has an explanation of existence. This is either done by its own nature or by that nature of an external cause. So we could think of literally anything at all. So I see a chair in front of me. So I could say, okay, well, here's a chair. Why does this chair exist? Anyone got an answer for me? Why does this chair exist that's right here in the room? Yeah.
Because someone created it and someone invented it.
Yeah, but why? James? To sit on. Perfect. Why does a chair exist? Well, because people want to sit down and they want, places to do that. And this chair looks like it maybe specifically was created. It doesn't have any armrests, right? It's pretty simple. It looks just like all of the other chairs in the room. So this chair probably exists for utility, right? It looks like it's cheap materials. They can make a lot of them. There's no armrest, so you can sit them all close together, maybe around a table or something. And they're brown, so I don't know why, but they are. Yes, and they stack. Oh, there we go. So they're all the same, so they can stack away. So you can put them up, take them out. They're for events. They're for meetings. They're for gatherings. There's a reason and a purpose and a why behind chairs being created, specifically this chair, but all chairs being created. And part of that is done by its own nature. We can look at it and say this is probably why it was created. Or we could also probably find the manufacturer's notes. And we can look at blueprints that someone had come up and said, well, these bars need to bend up around the back to help give it proper back support. And it needs to be riveted here and here and here and here. And the feet need to be able to swivel a little bit. And then you can, if the legs come up at this proper angle, then we can stack them up on top of each other. And so you could look at it and just say, because the chair exists, I can figure out why. Or you can go to the manufacturer manual and say, this is why the chair exists from their point of view. Okay, so that's the first thing, is everything that exists has some sort of a reason. Number two, the universe exists. Right, that's point number two, is everything that exists for a reason. The universe exists. Okay, so then the question is, why, right? Well, the only explanation is that of an external, transcendent, personal cause. The cause must be greater than the universe, right? Nothing creates itself, right? Nothing creates itself or out of its own power, right? A chair cannot make another chair. It needs a manufacturer, a person who knows how to make that chair to step in and say, I'm going to make this chair, right? So the universe exists. Well, the universe can't just make itself. So what made the universe then? The universe, as we've kind of looked at already a little bit, it's pretty massive. So the only logical explanation is that of an external, transcendent, personal cause, and the cause must be something greater than the universe. So in the fourth point, well, why does anything exist? Why does the universe exist? What can you think of that fits these criteria in the third point? External, transcendent, personal cause. What fits that criteria? Elijah?
First of all, what's the
Criteria. What are these points explaining? Thank you. External, meaning outside of the universe. Transcendent means it can fill and...
the transcend is like the stuff that's inside the stars or the outside of the universe.
But it's got to be outside the universe. Stars are part of creation. And it's got to be personal, right? Because if it's creating, it has some sort of a reason to. So it's got to have some sort of a personality.
Like a building?
Nope. Buildings don't have personality. I mean, I guess architecturally they do, but they don't have emotive human emotion. kind of a thing. Nope. It's got to be external, outside the universe, not created. So it's not created, it fills everything, and it's personal. Yes. Yeah, God. God's the only thing that can fit up all of those criteria. The way that Craig explains it is, what can you think that fits these criteria? An unembodied, conscious mind, a spiritual being. And this being must have power to cause things to happen. So he doesn't even go as far as to say, well, it's God, right? Because he's arguing with somebody who maybe doesn't believe in God. So he says, well, it's just some sort of existential, like a consciousness, just a mind up outside of space. It's a spiritual being outside of reality, or like physical reality, I should say. And it's spiritual, and it has power to cause things to happen. So it's a powerful, spiritual, conscious being. Still sounds like God, right? So the contingency argument, a lot of times you'll have apologists, people who argue for Christianity, do something like this, where they're going to make an argument, and the conclusion that they come to is just shy of God. And the reason that they do that is because they want you to see that God is the conclusion, but they don't want to force the other person to say, well, you're just saying that because you believe the Bible. So they tend to go just close enough to who God is without saying it's God. And then we can all sit here and say, okay, yeah, that's God. That's pointing to God. Does that make sense?
I think it's kind of like leaving breadcrumbs for them.
Exactly,
Leave
yep.
breadcrumbs to this point, so
Yep.
we can get to the point where we believe that there's a God.
Yep,
But then, who is this God?
right,
And then we start to go further. Let's start looking at the other monotheistic gods,
right.
and eventually we reach Jesus.
Yes. And that's why this is part of this kind of building blocks lesson here, more kind of on the front end of things, is that today I'm not making an argument for the Christian God, right? We did an argument for the Bible a few weeks ago. We're going to have more in-depth arguments about that in the future. Right now, we're just going to get to that basic level of, is there any divine being, or is it just the physical world? Like, that's kind of the dichotomy that the back and forth we're dealing with today. And so, yeah, so the pointing to is, well, there's a God, and we're leaving a little breadcrumb. So we're even doing that today, leaving a little breadcrumb. And hopefully you get to that point later down the line of specifically who this God is. And we have touched on it. But I'd hope that it would be the Christian God, because it is. Okay, next one. So this is not in your notes, but this kind of leaves us with two options, right? It's either that there's a God or there's nothing, right? Because if something had to create the entire universe, you could just deny all of that. I don't know logically how you could do that, but somebody maybe would do that, make that argument of, well, no, there's nothing. And if that's where you get to, I just figured, well, let's kind of put down the logic trails between a God and a nothing and see which one we want to land on, logically, okay? So first of all, if there's a God, we would probably say that that God created the universe, right? If you don't believe in that God, then you would say that nothing created the universe, right? So far, are we tracking? Yes, perfect. Thank you for the verbal feedback. Next. On the God side, well, the God side, we would say there is a nothing camp. There are people who believe that nothing created, and the nothing camp says God doesn't exist. The response to that is, well, nothing definitely does not exist, right? It's a little funny, but they go, well, you don't believe, or you believe in a God who doesn't exist, who created the universe, and I go, well, you believe nothing created the universe, and nothing definitely does not exist. Point 3, God is a being that you cannot prove scientifically, so by observable, repeatable tests, right? So there are times where God will speak to us and we can prove God with some logic and things like that, but a scientific test, I don't think you can really get to that conclusion. Nothing, however, can also not be proven scientifically by an observable, repeatable test because it's nothing. God created everything from the Latin, it's a term called ex nihilo, which means literally from nothing. But it's not that there's nothing, right? It's that there was God. And that God decided, I'm going to create an entire universe from nothing. Because I can, because I'm God. Whereas the nothing camp would say, well, nothing created everything from nothing, ex nihilo. Can nothing create anything from nothing? No? Okay, good. We're tracking here. This is good. We're tracking. Have you ever seen nothing do anything? No. So nothing definitely cannot create everything from nothing. What? Oh, just wait till we get to the end. Now, in believing in God, right, when we die, where do we go? Heaven, to be with God. If you believe in nothing when you die, where do you go? Nowhere. They believe you go to be with nothing. The crazy thing is, in this God doesn't exist camp, the answer of, okay, well then what is there, is an idol. It's a false god called nothing that they're giving the divine attributes to. You think about it, right? Who created the earth? Well, we would say God created the earth. They would say nothing. Where do you go when you die? Nowhere, nothing. Who loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life? Nothing, nobody. Nobody cares about me and has a wonderful plan for my life. Right? They just take out the name God and put in the name nothing. And so all of a sudden, nothing doesn't just become a, well, I'm so smart, right? I don't have to believe in divine beings and all this stuff. No, you do. You just renamed it nothing. And so when you're looking at, well, is there a God? Yes, there has to be a God. And anyone who says, no, it's nothing, they believe in a God. They just call him nothing. It's crazy to me. And then somehow the world or people let them kind of just skate off and be, well, I'm smart enough to say that it's a nothing God, and that works for me. And we just let that slide. Yeah.
There are some things you're allowing them in there too. So
Yeah.
Science is a study of the natural world.
Right.
And by definition, God is a supernatural being or outside of nature.
Yep.
Outside the laws of nature. So science, by definition, can't prove or disprove God because it's outside the laws of nature.
Exactly.
So it wouldn't be a logical way to test for the existence of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say you should ask a scientist to justify how the universe exists without using something supernatural. So the most basic form of that question would be, where did the first particle of matter or energy come from? And the only two answers are, it has always existed, or it was created. And if it was created, it violates the scientific law that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. And if it's created, it had to be by a supernatural being. So now you're already in the God world.
Right.
And if you say it's always been there, then you're saying that time is eternal, and there's no, like this is getting high level, but there's, time is not a dimension, because it has no beginning or end, and that's the core of string theory, which is what scientists use to explain how life exists from non-living things. And so if they say that it's always been there, they now can't justify how non-living material turned into living things later, and they know it. And so you'll never get them to answer that question.
You want the microphone? You want? That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to repeat it all, but that was, I hope we all heard that.
I think it goes back to
Yeah.
120 again.
Yeah.
Where people are without excuse because they choose not to believe. In this particular situation, where God versus no God, they are choosing not to believe.
Yeah.
And I was just telling Gail over here, there's actual naturalists who are on record saying, we don't allow the supernatural to be a part of our considerations whatsoever because it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So if they come to a point where they're like, wow, that is beyond our naturalist explanation,
Yeah.
we don't even go any further because there is no God. And so it's really sad because they live
Yeah.
Or it's just, I mean, nature's beautiful, they enjoy nature, they love it, but then it's like, but who do I praise for it?
Yeah.
And that's, I find that so sad.
Yeah. I heard someone once say, God is the author of creation, and when we try to deny that authorship, it's stealing. You're stealing away his copyright from that authorship, from that work that he wrote. So yeah,
Galileo said the universe is written in the language of mathematics.
there we go. I'll take it too. It's probably a lot smarter than whoever I quoted. Yeah. So the main takeaway today is, right now we're looking at it going, there's a God. There is a God. And as we continue in the class and continue to get deeper and deeper off of these kind of foundational pieces, we're going to learn who that God is in a lot more detail. So, I turned it off. There we go. Do we have any final thoughts? We kind of already jumped into this one, but do we have any final thoughts before we jump into our project time? Yeah?
Real quick, if you go the other direction and say, okay, there's no God, then start acting like it. So there's a book called Straw Dogs written by an atheist calling out other atheists for saying they're atheists but not living like it. And so if there is no God, then we're not created. And if we're not created, we're here randomly. And if we're here randomly, we have no meaning or value. So why would you say that a mass murderer is bad? There's nothing bad about destroying things that aren't created. Like if you pick up a tree and burn it, like that, we don't say that that's bad, even though it was a once living thing.
Right.
Or you cut it down. So if they want to say there's no God, then ask them to justify why we would have morality. Because there's no such thing.
Yeah. So yeah, if there's no God, why do we care about right and wrong? Even kind of jumping into a little bit of last week's lesson when we touched on nihilism, right? Like the natural end to atheism is like, well, you just do whatever you want then. Doesn't matter. And so yeah, kind of going off of that as well. Like we can, I would say, very confidently lean into the fact that there is a God because everyone lives like there is one, even if they don't believe it.
It's asking people to live a consistent life,
Yeah.
which they clearly don't.
Yeah.
Because they don't want me to come and steal their Lamborghini,
Right. Yeah.
although it shouldn't matter.
Materialist, you don't want me to come steal your material possessions, but that's all you have. That's great. Any final thoughts? Going once, going twice? Sold.